A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange isn't just a film, it's a cultural grenade that exploded on impact. Based on Anthony Burgess' novel, this dystopian tale follows Alex DeLarge, a teenage sociopath with a love for ultraviolence and Beethoven. The film shocked audiences with its graphic depictions of rape, murder, and psychological manipulation. Its raw intensity wasn't just controversial, it was dangerous. In the UK, the film sparked a wave of copycat crimes so disturbing that Kubrick himself pulled it from release. In the US, it was slapped with an X rating and banned in several states. But beyond the controversy, A Clockwork Orange raised disturbing questions about free will, state control, and the dark corners of human nature. Was it glorifying violence or warning against it? That very ambiguity is what made the film so terrifying and powerful. With its haunting visuals, unsettling score, and unforgettable performances, this movie carved its place in cinematic history, not by playing it safe, but by breaking every rule in the book. The Last Temptation of Christ, 1988. Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ ignited a firestorm like few films ever have. Based on Nikos Kazantzakis' controversial novel, the movie reimagines the life of Jesus, not as a flawless divine figure, but as a man struggling with fear, doubt, lust, and temptation. The most explosive scene? A dream sequence in which Jesus imagines living a normal life, marrying Mary Magdalene, having children, and avoiding crucifixion. For many religious groups, that was blasphemy. The backlash was instant and intense. Churches protested, theaters were threatened, and the film was outright banned in several countries, and in parts of the US. The outrage was so fierce that one theater in Paris was even firebombed. But behind the controversy was a deeply human and philosophical film exploring the conflict between spiritual calling and earthly desire. Scorsese, a devout Catholic himself, never meant to offend, only to spark thought. Yet in challenging traditional portrayals of Christ, he unleashed one of the most polarizing films in American history, one still debated, banned, and dissected decades later. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. Cannibal Holocaust isn't just controversial, it's one of the most infamous films ever made. Directed by Ruggero Deodato, this Italian horror shocker was banned in the US for its brutal realism and extreme violence. The plot follows a rescue team uncovering footage shot by a missing documentary crew deep in the Amazon. What they find is disturbing beyond belief: scenes of rape, mutilation, and gruesome cannibalism. The film was so realistic that Deodato was actually arrested and charged with making a snuff film. He had to bring his actors to court to prove they were alive. But what truly pushed boundaries was the use of real animal killings on screen, a choice that outraged audiences and animal rights groups alike. Though it was eventually released in the US with heavy cuts, it remains banned or restricted in many countries. Still, Cannibal Holocaust sparked important conversations about media ethics, exploitation, and the line between fiction and reality. Love it or hate it, it left a scar on cinema, one that still unsettles and fascinates horror fans to this day. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre wasn't just a horror film, it was a raw, relentless nightmare that redefined fear. Directed by Tobe Hooper, this low-budget slasher followed a group of friends who fall prey to a family of cannibalistic killers in rural Texas. At the center of it all is Leatherface, a chainsaw-wielding maniac wearing a mask made of human skin. The violence was intense, but it wasn't just the gore that made the film controversial. It was the unshakable sense of dread, the grainy realism, and the psychological brutality. Audiences believed they were watching something truly depraved. Though it was far less graphic than many of its successors, the film's tone was so disturbing that it was banned in several US cities and countries around the world. Critics slammed it as morally corrupt, yet it quietly gained a cult following and became one of the most influential horror films ever made. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre didn't just scare people. It shattered their nerves and helped spark the slasher craze that would dominate horror for decades. Natural Born Killers, 1994. Natural Born Killers, directed by Oliver Stone, was a cinematic Molotov cocktail thrown at the heart of American media culture. Starring Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis as Mickey and Mallory, two lovers turned mass murderers, the film painted a wild, psychedelic picture of violence, chaos, and fame. But what made it so controversial wasn't just the brutality. It was the message. Stone turned the mirror on society, showing how media glamorizes criminals and sensationalizes death. The film was a visual onslaught, with rapid edits, animation, surreal sequences, and fourth-wall breaks, all creating a dizzying, disturbing experience. It quickly drew fire from critics and censors. Several murders were reportedly inspired by the movie, including the infamous Columbine shooting, leading to lawsuits and bans in some states. The media, ironically, gave it even more attention, proving Stone's point. Natural-born killers wasn't just about killers, it was about the world that made them celebrities. Love it or hate it, the film remains a raw, unfiltered critique of modern media obsession that still echoes loudly today. The Birth of a Nation, 1915. The Birth of a Nation, directed by D.W. Griffith, is one of the most technically groundbreaking and morally troubling films in American history. Celebrated for its revolutionary filmmaking techniques, like cross-cutting, close-ups, and large-scale battle scenes, it helped shape the very language of cinema. But its content sparked immediate outrage. Set during and after the Civil War, the film portrays the Ku Klux Klan as heroic saviors and African Americans, many portrayed by white actors in blackface, as violent, unintelligent villains. It promoted racist stereotypes and glorified white supremacy. The film was used as propaganda by the reborn Klan, fueling real-world racial violence and division. While it was a massive box office success, the backlash was equally fierce. Civil rights leaders like W.B. Du Bois protested the film, and it was banned or censored in several U.S. cities. To this day, The Birth of a Nation remains one of the most controversial films ever made, a disturbing reminder that art can be both historically important and morally dangerous. Its legacy continues to ignite debates about race, censorship, and responsibility in filmmaking. Freaks, 1932. Freaks isn't just a horror film. It's a haunting masterpiece that shattered boundaries and horrified audiences long before gore and slashers became mainstream. Directed by Todd Browning, the film tells the story of circus performers, real-life individuals with physical deformities, who are betrayed by a normal trapeze artist and her strongman lover. But when the freaks take revenge, the film turns terrifying. What made Freaks truly controversial was its cast. Browning used actual sideshow performers, including people with dwarfism, conjoined twins, and other disabilities, in a time when society shunned them. Audiences were outraged, with many calling the film exploitative and grotesque. One woman reportedly suffered a miscarriage after watching it. MGM pulled the film from theaters, heavily censored it, and later banned it outright in several states and countries. Browning's career never recovered. Yet over time, Freaks was reevaluated and embraced as a powerful tale of humanity, loyalty, and justice, flipping the script on who the real monsters are. Today, it's recognized as a cult classic, decades ahead of its time in challenging perceptions of beauty and normalcy. Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. Pier Paolo Pasolini's Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom, is perhaps the most disturbing film ever made, and deliberately so. Loosely based on the twisted writings of the Marquis de Sade, the movie is set in fascist Italy, and follows 4 elite men who abduct 18 young people, and subject them to a horrifying series of dehumanizing acts over the course of 120 days. Torture, sexual violence, forced consumption of human waste, no taboo is left untouched. Pasolini wasn't just trying to shock, he was making a brutal statement about power, corruption, and the fascist control of bodies and minds. But the extremity of his vision led to global outrage. The film was banned in several U.S. states, and remains prohibited or heavily censored in many countries to this day. Even seasoned critics walked out, while others called it a necessary, if excruciating, piece of political art. Pasolini was murdered shortly before the film's release, a mystery that only deepened its myth. Salo remains a cinematic test of endurance and morality, forcing viewers to confront the darkest side of humanity. Pink Flamingos, 1972. John Waters' Pink Flamingos is a wild, outrageous cult classic that broke every rule of good taste, and then gleefully smashed them again. Centered on the filthiest person alive competition between the infamous Divine and a rival family, the film delivers shock after shock with scenes of grotesque humor, explicit nudity, and taboo-breaking acts that made mainstream audiences recoil. From eating dog feces to bizarre sexual antics, Pink Flamingos thrived on its unapologetic transgression. It was banned in several U.S. cities and countries, condemned as obscene and morally offensive. But Waters and Divine turned controversy into a badge of honor, creating a film that became a rallying point for underground counterculture and queer cinema. The movie's blend of camp, chaos, and anarchy challenged ideas of what cinema could be and who it was for. Today, Pink Flamingos is celebrated not just for its shock value, but for giving voice to outsiders and redefining cinematic freedom. It's a chaotic, hilarious rebellion, a film that dares to be disgustingly unforgettable. I Am Curious, Yellow, 1967. I Am Curious, Yellow is a bold, groundbreaking Swedish film that challenged sexual and political taboos in ways that shocked American audiences. Directed by Vilgot Sjöman, the film blends documentary-style realism with explicit scenes of sexuality and nudity, exploring themes of class struggle, politics, and personal freedom through the eyes of a young woman named Lena. When it was released in the U.S., the film quickly ran into legal trouble due to its frank portrayal of sex, leading to obscenity charges and bans in several states. The controversy sparked a nationwide debate about censorship, artistic freedom, and the line between pornography and art. The film was seized by customs and heavily censored before it could be widely shown. Yet, despite the uproar, I Am Curious, Yellow became an underground hit, paving the way for more open conversations about sexuality in cinema. Its raw honesty and political edge made it a landmark in film history, proving that movies could be more than entertainment. They could challenge society's deepest norms.